Good morning, guys. This is Saturday, 22nd of January. Um, I just wanted to do another quick stream. I guess obviously when you do see kind of panic and fear in the market, it's worth kind of highlighting, what we're seeing and why we're seeing it. I think just to give a little bit of comfort and reassurance to, you know, our followers, I guess, but what we're actually seeing as of now. So there's nothing really to kind of panic about. And if you follow this for a while, you're following Paul's daily streams. Although he's been sounding like a broken record recently, I think the message has kind of remained the same. Right now, in my last couple of streams, apart from the snowboarding video, a lot of this has been basic information that a lot of retail traders almost didn't want to hear. Right now, a lot of fake gurus out there, they'll be calling 100k, 235k, plan B's 92k last April. This is crazy, right? That all we've tried to do since setting up the Discord server is to give real defined logic and value to the followers, to the subscribers, to actually teach them why we're seeing what we're seeing and allow them to kind of do this for themselves, right? We're not always going to be around, for putting out free videos onto YouTube. But the general idea was we wanted to put our project, our Discord channel together to try to highlight how crazy some of these calls and fake gurus and just influencers are as a whole. Okay, now Paul's been trading 30 odd years. I've been trading 21 years this year. We've been in this market a long time, right? I've personally traded Bitcoin since 2011, right? So ultimately, understanding where we are, it doesn't come down to one chain analysis. This, for me, over the last year has just shown Bitcoin becoming more and more institutionalized, right? We're in an unregulated market. It's almost optimal for the large institutional players to play in this space without any fear or hesitation, right? So these guys have got buckets of cash and the trading knowledge that most people never learn in a lifetime of trading retail, right? They've got the best tools, the best everything, including a pocket full of cash, right? Now, when you understand the mentality behind what Composite Man uses to ultimately profit from, it's always the retail losing, right? 75% plus of the time, it's retail losing, right? Now, let's go back a year in time. And in this is actually from just recently, this is a post I've posted just to show covering the last year. Now, on TradingView, and I'll put a link to this below into the video, on TradingView, what I'd done recently was I covered a full year worth of the post that I'd posted throughout the year. Okay. Now, going back to December 2020, I talked about why and how Bitcoin was becoming institutionalized, how you could start to, kind of hang your hat on this in terms of these key levels, right? We then come into, I think this was the January time. We were talking about the reaccumulation and why we were likely to move up, above the 50K, where the institutional levels were. And then this takes us then into what I would regard as the value area, which is something I've covered quite a bit recently in the last couple of posts and streams. I know I've mentioned this in my snowboarding video without the charts. So I'll put all these links to all the different videos and posts below. So I'm just going to put this particular post into that right now. Let's jump forward a little bit further. Now, in May, I was talking about the distribution, but the distribution was actually covered a couple of months before, right? So in March, we actually spoke about this. Now, they blew up the rocket. This was the post. And the general idea was that we were actually seeing distribution play itself out for a 3 to 4 weekly move at the extension levels that we'd called back, from December, a couple of months before. So we'd seen the levels in December. We'd seen the kind of play out. You can see I'd called a short at this particular move. We then obviously had the new short for the rocket post, and then the projected forecast was down for a weekly fall at around this orange box, right? We then went up, and this is where we got to in terms of the Now monthly 3, weekly 5. Okay. Now I talked about this then, this particular move up. We'd had from there for me the low, the 1, the 2, up for a long 3, pull back 4. And it was that 4 that I actually had a lot of people say, "Oh, well, we've missed the bottom. We're never going to get this opportunity again." The reality is, guys, look, this was actually posted. Let me just see if I can zoom in on this. This was actually posted on the 24th of August last year. I'd actually said in the post, mapped it out. We were coming down from around the 50K level, down for that 4, which for me is what I would regard as a daily, because this was inside the weekly. So we were coming down for a 4, up for a 5. And if you can see this particular note, I was looking for obviously the monthly 3. Where we were going to get to was I would like to see buyers buying at 65, which means we're likely to see a little bit of a run just over that 65. And then we're very likely to see 40K again very quick, right? Now, the logic for that was all based on the Elliott bias. Let me come back to this chart. It was all based on the Elliott bias, right? So we'd called the move up, we called the move then back down, and then we'd seen the logic as to why we were coming back. Now, again, back in March, this was ultimately the roadmap already pre-written. So we can follow this all the way through, and we can go back a full year's worth of history to show exactly why we are, where we are. Okay. So what I'll then do is I'll come into the next chart. I think it was the roadmap, the update. So I'm going to come into this update. So this was basically the update from the initial March call. Now, we were talking about why the top, we were talking about why the bottom. This was obviously the August post. This was actually the day before, as to why we were seeing, pullback move. And we talked about that in the previous post. Up obviously to the 69K and then back down to the 40, as you've just seen. I guess the reason for me emphasizing this and kind of reiterating this, and I know a lot of this is what you've probably already heard me say over the last couple of months, but it's really important to understand. People come to me and say, where next? Guys, I've given you this kind of 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago in some of this, right? We've talked about everything from dark pools, why the extension levels are there, even managing the psychology. We called the same thing in Ethereum, and all of these posts are all live and free on TradingView, right? So we've covered this, months and months and months ago. Even this one here, look, we were talking about this level, right? And this was the 27th of October. We were talking about this level becoming the top, right? And this particular post was actually based on a previous post. Right? Let me see if I can find the one before that. This was actually based on the previous post in terms of why we were calling these levels. I don't know if whether it was back in the year or whether it was the roadmap, but let me just jump forward into one of these two. Yeah, this one here, look. So we were talking about this, full month before, and this is what we've given to the subscribers, within Discord. We were talking about why this gray level was kind of critical, right? Why this was the high, and ultimately for me becoming that monthly 3, right? We then went up, and like I said, basically a full month later, we come up, we tagged the level practically to the pip, and dropped and started rejecting that particular level as a whole. Now, if I flip across into the chart, let me just see if there's nothing else worth sharing. So yeah, if you come into these couple of posts, right? So a year in the life of Bitcoin kind of covers a lot of this. We've got everything from leverage funds, cluster levels, dark pools. There's loads and loads in this. So if you haven't seen these, definitely worth clicking through. We've covered obviously the update and the roadmap. This particular one I've mentioned again in the last couple of streams, definitely worth looking. This has been basically a full year's worth of education, and every single image here is actually a post within a post, right? So definitely worth seeing all of these. And like I said, all free content in terms of TradingView. If we then come across to what we're seeing now with Bitcoin as we stand right now, what I'll do is again, I'll jump across into this. I'll put this as a chapter within the video if you just want to see this. In terms of what you've just missed, if you've clicked to this particular phase, you've just missed the logic as to why we were getting where we are. Now, you might think that there's, a shortcut in terms of jumping to this part of the video, but I guess overall, what you haven't seen is the why. And the why is a lot more important than the what. Because understanding where we are and where we're likely to go next is very critical, big picture, okay? Because we are looking at the potential corrective move and whether or not it's A, B, C, etc., which I'll come into in a second. But this is what we try to emphasize for the students so that you guys get to understand this, to do this for yourself without being dependent or reliant on myself or Paul to give you this kind of information, okay? So, in essence, let's come into what we talk about. Yeah, that one, this one. Okay, so what we're looking at, right, is where we are right now and where I think we go kind of next. I'm going to come into some of my drawings. Let's come down into this. Now, I've talked about a couple of things, right? We've talked about ABC levels, right? Now, a potential drop A, we're still going to see a B, right? And that's, it almost has to happen unless we say this was the 5. Personally, I didn't like this as a 5. I think although it would have created almost a better double top for the situation, I think the extension, the second high, the current all-time high, was actually a better extension when you're looking at pure Fibonacci's right now. We could argue that this being the top, we have an A, we have a B, we have a C. There's no signs yet of this letting up as a full out now trend reversal. I've spoken about this again in previous streams where a weekly move could have taken from what I would have classed as April to May through to July, August. A monthly move could easily be 4 times that. Just common sense, right? Now, I'm not saying it has to be, but it could. We spoke about back in November the point and figure levels and the zone, why we were talking about the distribution from this kind of zone. And exactly as we played out, it's done what it's done. It's taken a while, but you'd expect that in a monthly move. We've covered some of the GAN angles and the GAN levels. I don't need to go into all of that. What else have we got? This is just a projection from the January. So this was a move a couple of days back. Potential targets for a B. I think for me, there's 2 areas of interest: 47 around 600 and 55 to 57 overall potential B targets. We talked about the Wyckoff schematic. This is something that, again, I spoke about back October time, where we were talking about potential plays for the moves in a much bigger schematic, being then the monthly move. Now, I don't know whether we get, what I would regard as an LPSY move back up and then back down for a final distribution B and C. That would make a lot of sense given everything else seems to have played out as we expected. We've talked about kind of cluster levels. Now, this is again something we teach within Discord. We've got a couple of videos on this. A couple of cluster levels as to where we were. You can see how respectful these levels are. And this goes back to the end of November there, you can see. So a couple of cluster levels that we actually cover. You can see we've dropped through. We've come back to retest the second, down to the third, the large one, back up. Didn't quite make the full one, and then straight through. But you can see, these levels are, very useful. And for me, what's interesting is not the fact that, hey, we were right. It's more the fact that this is becoming more and more institutionalized, right? We've talked about this again. This is to do with another technique, a master pattern type technique, where again you can see the key levels, why, where they sit. They become the support, the resistance. I tend to use bigger line thicknesses for the heavier moves, and then use dotted lines or smaller with a little bit of transparency for the smaller clusters. So you can see we've come down, and again we've done nothing that's actually shocked or surprised me in terms of this particular move, right? We've actually collected liquidity and dropped. We've collected liquidity and dropped. And where did we drop? To a line that we've put in months and months and months ago, right? Value area ranges, again, similar thing, where we saw the value area. This was going back, like I said, March last year in terms of the value area. We've seen the moves, we've called the moves, and, nothing really has come as a shock. 15th of October, again, I explained this in the last video, guys. We were expecting this move. We didn't quite get the 4618. We got into the box. We kind of peaked above the box, but it was, I don't even know what that was, 68. So we were $800 off in terms of a 4618 and actually dropped. So for me, 3, 4, and 5, 5 hyper extended, what they call basically an overthrow move there, and then out through the channel. And this was called on the 15th of October. Interesting levels, nothing in that one. the interesting group. Now, this is again another technique, just clustering. I'm not even going to go into this one. This is something that we've shared in a couple of the last posts. You'll see these as to why we were using these and these particular techniques. This was back in August, some pullback levels. You can see how respectful Bitcoin's becoming when you see these levels. You see the support, you see the resistance, you see support. Where are we likely to go now? We've got a 32.4 as a next potential drop if A is to continue. Um, so look, the channel in August, 345. And again, you can see this. You go back to my videos back in August, you'll see me talk about this then as to why we would expect these kinds of moves to happen. So we've talked about accumulation. Again, surprise, surprise, it's doing what we'd called, weeks, months ago. Night levels, guys, this is kind of, for me now getting pretty, boring in the grand scheme of things. We've called these moves, we've talked about them. We've given the explanations, the logic behind all of this move, all the cluster levels, why we're using these levels. So, key levels. I'm just going to go in and say, look, you can get the picture now in terms of what we've talked about. We've tried to highlight all of this in terms of education so that it's not us having to give you and spoon feed you this kind of intel. Okay. So if we look now in terms of where we are next or where we are in terms of a potential end, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go A, B, and C as a first option. No surprise there. From a cluster perspective, we've come down to a Fibonacci extension level, which is inside a point and figure extension range in the zone. And we start to see a level, okay? If we now take this level and we come down, I'm going to go swing low there and swing high there. Again, we've got the 618, sitting at this level. So for me, this is pretty good in terms of potential end of a move down currently. I'm not saying that's the end as a whole. I think all I'm saying is we're going to see quite a lot of support in and around this particular zone. Okay. So if we now look at what's next from there, we could say, okay, we're going to take two things. I'm going to go from the low. I'm going to ignore this high for now, and I'm going to come down to the current low, and I'm going to start looking at where we are in terms of potential pullbacks. Now, we could go really high and we come up along. I'm going to change the color on this. We could go really high and come up as far as this. We are likely to see the golden zone be in 618 to 50. So I'm going to change this back to orange. And that really gives me the first two areas of interest. Personally, I really like the 382. It's kind of one that catches a lot of people out. Many people wait for the 50, the 618, and therefore a little drop from that. And these are areas that I'll be monitoring, as we start to get back up to understand where it is we go next. Now, if I stick the stochastic on, we still false bar on the daily, which means we could easily grind down a bit lower. Right now, we got 32 as the next level for me personally. Another area of interest. If I come out to the weekly, weekly is only now sitting in the oversold area, so we are likely to see a potential pullback from there. I think this will sucker a lot of bulls back in very quick. And then we come into the monthly time frame. So on a monthly, there's still movement in this now. Bear in mind, if we've taken a move from December, 2020, that's a full year, and we're only halfway down this particular move. Okay, so there's nothing stopping us having what I would regard now as this being the a push up for a B, and that could easily be 47 to 57 as a range. We come back down, there's going to be liquidity underneath these levels at 28, and that's providing we're only creating an ABC. We could easily go into a combo move and this be spread out over, multiple months. It could even run into 2023, so I think for me, without going into a lot of depth right now, it's a Saturday morning. I'm really happy with what we've seen so far. No real shock, surprise. I think people screaming, we've lost this and lost that. I think it's no surprise, you've been following people like Plan B with a 135K call. It's 100K out, guys, in terms of where we thought we would be. That's not a little bit wrong. That's an awful lot wrong. You know, and I think that's the problem. Social media isn't doing many people many favors these days. So yeah, I'm going to leave the stream as it is for now. I hope that gives you a little bit of insight. If you didn't watch the first couple of minutes of the stream, it's definitely worth going back, just to see what we've talked about over the last year. I think it's worth clicking on the educational and the year's worth of Bitcoin links below. And yeah, keep watching Paul's stream. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.